one common theme now is that there's a number of Jan 6ers or Jan 6 ancillary or incidental who are still behind bars, but for reasons that transcend or go beyond the Jan 6 conviction and pardon for which they were convicted.
There's 10 in total last time I checked. Larry Brock on X has been following the still incarcerated J6ers. My focus has been on Jeremy Brown. I think what happened to Jeremy Brown in our federal courts in Florida and Tampa was a grave injustice. I believe that the FBI planted evidence against Jeremy Brown. I believe the U.S. Attorney's Office in Tampa was unbelievably unethical in how they presented that case to the jury. Jeremy Brown was overlooked as a J6er in terms of the pardons because in the Tampa case, he was restricted from being able to make a J6 argument during the case. And so J6 never once came up throughout the whole trial. And this was an effort to keep out the whistleblower path that Jeremy Brown took. He was visited by Department of Homeland Security and the FBI in December of 2020 and asked if he would be a confidential human source for an event that was taking place in January. And he refused, and he recorded the conversation with their knowledge. He held on to that until Director Wray came out and told the American public that there were no FBI agents or federal agents in the crowd in D.C. on that day. And Jeremy blew the whistle on that, exposed the recordings that he had. And then from there, he immediately became a target for the DOJ.
So my audience is not going to be as familiar with any of this as your audience. Jeremy Brown, starting from the get-go before Jan 6, what did he do? What was he doing in life? Was he law enforcement before Jan 6?
So Jeremy Brown was a 20-year retired master sergeant in the U.S. Army Special Forces Green Berets, which is like, the elite of the elite, some of the best special operators that we have in the world. And, he served 20 years in that. He was part of the Bo Bergdahl mission, a U.S. Army deserter who abandoned his post, ran off and joined the Taliban or was picked up by the Taliban, and for 5 years was in their captivity. And Jeremy Brown's unit was tasked with going and recovering that. And like I said, he retired after 20 years of faithful service and just wanted to live a quiet life in Tampa and be, just a normal everyday citizen.
Also, to refresh everybody's memory about Bo Bergdahl. What was his last? I always get
Bergdahl, Bergdahl.
So to remind everybody, when they rescued Bo Bergdahl, American servicemen died in that rescue mission, and he was part of that. He was part of that rescue mission.
Correct.
Okay, and so that's his career, unblemished, untarnished, a man of honor and good repute. Pre-Jan 6, how did he become aware? Who came to him talking about an event that is coming to be, and what would be the context in which anyone would have approached him?
So in December of 2020, before Donald Trump had made any announcements about January 6th and a rally in January 6th, he was approached by Department of Homeland Security and FBI on two separate occasions, once at his house and once out in public. Both times he recorded the interactions with their permission. These are publicly available. He's published them. You can still to this day see him. Gateway Pundit has them up. A couple other, I think InfoWars has them up. A couple other outlets have them up. And they basically were trying to recruit him to be a confidential human source. And throughout his time in the Green Berets, Jeremy Brown had acted or worked in congruence with Joint Terrorism Task Force before they were weaponized against the American people, when they actually did work on overseas actual terrorists and not trying to weaponize MAGA or whatever it may be, and turning all their resources to, not all their resources, but a chunk of their resources to domestic terrorism. So Jeremy was familiar with the process of being a human source, a confidential human source, and familiar with the JTTF and how they kind of operate things.
Okay, and they approach him out of the blue.
Yeah. Unsolicited.
And he starts and he says, I'm going to record this conversation. They ask him if he wants to be a CHS for an upcoming event, undisclosed. And he says no.
Yeah. He had recently joined the Oath Keepers, which, of course, their name's been drugged through the mud. Oath Keepers and Proud Boys. We just covered the Proud Boys. Yeah. So his name was drugged through the mud. And so I'm sure there was some sort of a flag on his name. And as soon as they saw Oath Keepers and Green Beret, they automatically assumed that this is somebody that perhaps they could squeeze and get them to, work on their behalf. And this happens all the time. I mean, we found out during the OIG's report on January 6th that there were at least, 24 or 32 confidential human sources in there. Dan Bongino says all the time that he knows 100% for a fact that there were federal agents in there, because he has federal agents that were friends that sent him pictures from that day of them in the crowd. This isn't something that's new. The federal government trying to infiltrate these organizations, especially domestic organizations that are constitutional. Militias are in the Constitution. It's in the Second Amendment, right?
Well, absolutely. A well-regulated militia for the I forget what the rest of it is. Is the idea though that they can pinch a guy who's got an unblemished military history because of his association with a verboten group? Like they say, we know that you're in the Proud Boys or the Oath Keepers. We'll ruin you if you don't help us.
Well, I don't know about ruin you necessarily. I think they just assume that they'll be compassionate to their mission. You know, they'll be somebody that just got out and understands, you know, how intelligence gathering works, human intelligence, etc. I don't know that they would have gone after him had he not blown the whistle and put this out there that there was, you know, some planning involved in this.
Okay, so now it makes a little more sense to me as they say, well, you're one of our brothers. You're in the Oath Keepers. Give us some information if you're so amenable.
Yeah.
Okay. He says no, he's got these 2 recordings. He does nothing with them. The events of January 6th occur. He was in the vicinity. I don't know exactly where he went, if he breached.
So on January 6th, Jeremy Brown was there as a providing security for one of the speaker's mothers. I believe it was for the speaker. So one of the permitted speakers, somebody that is allowed to be there, has a permit with U.S. Parks. And he was acting as security for the mother of that speaker, never went inside the Capitol, not accused of any violence whatsoever, and was hit with 2 misdemeanor trespass charges.
He was, I'll see if I can get the name. It doesn't really matter. He was the security for a VIP guest at the Stop the Steal rally. So he's there on the side of evil, according to the government, but he's there providing security to someone who's there for the Stop the Steal rally, from whence the so-called insurrection originated. Okay. He goes down to January. Well, okay, actually, I'm not sure offhand I know this. The Stop the Steal rally, what was the proximity of that rally to the Capitol building itself?
I think it was on the Capitol grounds, but it was like out in the grass around the perimeter. It wasn't
Right.
It wasn't like in the terrace or anything like that, I don't believe.
All right, so he's doing that. The events of January 6th breakout. Do you know when he gets arrested? When they confront him for his participation?
I believe he was arrested in September of 2021. So this is a good 8 or 9 months later.
And standard charges.
No. So he had the 2 misdemeanor charges in Washington, D.C., but they used those 2 misdemeanor charges in Washington, D.C. They went judge shopping and went from judge to judge to judge until they finally found a magistrate who would sign off on a search warrant for his property in Florida, which I don't really know how you justify that. When they went down to Florida in September to conduct this raid, Jeremy's girlfriend, long-term girlfriend, so I kind of refer to her as his wife all the time, but his common, girlfriend, long-term girlfriend, says when the FBI showed up on that day to search the house, they detained both of them first, and she had asked them on camera, "What are you searching for?" And the agent's response was, "When we find it, we'll let you know."
Unreal. And they end up finding various firearms, some of which are short barreled without registration. So they get him on some firearms charges, but there's a little bit of a big but to that story. What else do they allegedly find, or at least claim to have found?
So they end up charging Jeremy with 10 counts. He gets 2 counts for each for a firearm, a short barreled rifle, and a 410 shotgun that had the buttstock sawed off. It was a family heirloom that was left to him by his brother, who committed suicide in 2019. It was left to him as, inheritance. I don't even know if Jeremy had ever seen it. It was packed up in a box, and it's a small shotgun. 410 is like a BB gun on steroids.
If I may stop you there, his brother took his own life.
Correct, in 2019.
Was his brother a military as well?
That I don't know. I don't know that. So he has these 2 weapons. Then as they're serving the warrant, they go into his RV, which was, on property. They go into his RV and immediately they call for the whole site to be secured and everybody to evacuate. They found live ordnance. By the way, a key point in this is Jeremy Brown, being, a Green Beret, Special Forces, he had 14 security cameras throughout his property. He's a secure guy, secure-oriented individual, and they turned those off. They turned those off so that you can't, I don't know. They initially said it was when they conduct raids for SOPs, they turn off security camera footage, but then they left it off the entire time. So this agent goes into the RV, finds these 2 M67 fragmentation grenades, standard stuff we used in the military, takes them out, has him and a bomb tech there. I think it was Hillsborough County bomb tech. They take these grenades, which they're wrapped in duct tape. And that's something we do in the military. When I was in the Marines, we did the same thing. You wrap duct tape around it to protect the spoon so that, if a pin pops out, it's like a safety, right? It's like a safety device. They take these 2 grenades and they put them in the grass and they photograph them in the grass. Now, you're an attorney. You got to understand how, you just completely and totally spoiled that evidence.
Well,
When you take
it's reminiscent of the FBI staging the photograph of the classified documents. On the one hand, you're staging the appearance of the evidence. On the other hand, from DNA perspective, from tainting the evidence perspective, Lord knows what's on the grass, who touches it in between. I mean, I'm not an expert, but I do know that I have watched a lot of movies, and you just bag it, tag it, make sure that it doesn't get contaminated. But most importantly, not take photographs that have altered the original state of the evidence, the so-called evidence.
Exactly. So they take those photos. They eventually bring everybody back. They go on to find a CD. Well, they claim they found a CD. They also claim they found a classified document. So that's what they had: 2 guns, 2 grenades, a classified CD, and a classified document. So Jeremy gets arrested. He was already detained at this point in the back of a car. They bring him to prison, and he's locked up from there. He doesn't post bond. He doesn't want to take bond. He serves his time. Now, here's something, Jeremy acknowledges possession of those 2 firearms. He's a Second Amendment absolutist, as am I, and believes that, shall not be infringed is explicitly clear. There is no evidence of, any sort of a problem whatsoever from short-barreled rifles in terms of the commission of crimes. It's an absurd law. The National Firearms Act in general is an absurd law. And he's a Second Amendment absolutist, and given Bruin versus New York State Pistol Association, SBR should be legal anyways.